will now show a simple Logbooks demo in which equipment qualification functionality is shown. To access my PI sheet, I go into transaction CO60. Once I'm in this transaction, I can see many orders, some of which are completed, some of which are new, and some of which are in process. In this case, I'm going to select a brand new order so that I can update the equipment qualification. Selecting the individual order to be processed and clicking the Change PI Sheet button brings in the actual PI sheet in which each of the phases are listed. Color coding can be used to determine which phases can be accessed, although for demo purposes today, all phases have been activated. As you can see in the mixing phase, there are different process instructions which drive the activities necessary by the operator. I'm going to focus specifically on equipment qualification, in which we can see an equipment list button as well as status. As I click on the button, each of the equipment which is relevant for that phase is listed and its current status. Had any of the statuses not been cleaned, I would have seen that status here. As a result of these statuses, I can actually execute and assign the equipment to this order. Using the table entry, I can do the last signature, which allows me to sign for all 5 entries at once. Typically, I may do this one at a time in some cases, or I can actually assign individual extra equipment as well. But in this case, because I've made this signature, all of the 5 equipment have been listed as assigned. To actually see the logbook audit trail, I can use the concept of cockpits. You can see at the top of the screen I have an open cockpit link, in which when I click on this link, on the left side of my screen I now get a list of functions available to me as an operator. These functions are independent of the order itself, although they can be linked depending on the information being retrieved within these functions. In this case, I'll focus on the first, which is to display the logbook. This is very simply an audit trail of all of the transactions that have occurred against the equipment masters. When I hit execute here, I can see a history of these transactions in our demo system, including the last 5 entries which I just executed, in which I see that the 5 pieces of equipment have been assigned and to which order they have been assigned. This audit trail will continue to update as logbook entries are made. Closing out of the logbook audit report brings me back to my cockpit and back to my main PI sheet. I can close this cockpit by clicking on the Close Cockpit function here. And again, for purposes of the demo, I'm now going to assume that I've completed all my activities and I now wish to deassign the equipment from the order, which is done at the end of this phase. Again, I click on Get Equipment List and Status, in which I see all 5 of my equipment which have been assigned are listed. Using the signature function of entering on the last signature, although you can do this for each as well, I will now deassign all 5 equipment from this order, in which it moves the status into an idle used status. These statuses are configurable depending on your logbook's design. The last very important function related to logbooks is the logbooks themselves in terms of making updates to statuses based on cleaning. For convenience, I can actually do this within my PI sheet, although you would typically do this outside the confines of an individual order, because this is an activity typically done between orders. But to demonstrate the functionality, I'm going to click on Update Logbook, in which the right side of the screen now has an order independent function in which equipment statuses can be updated based on the configuration of those statuses and states. I'm going to hit Select Equipment, and in this case the plant maintenance equipment IDs, which is what is used in logbooks, are listed as a match code. And in this case I'll select the first, the induction sealer. When I do that, I can actually see that my equipment master has been brought in, as well as its status and date and timestamp in which that status was updated. Again, depending on the configuration of my individual states within logbooks, I can define the list here of the valid logbook states. This can include, for instance, minor cleaned, major cleaned, or anything else relevant to your design. In this case, I'm going to very simply change the status to cleaned and then sign for this status, just like I did before. The induction sealer now has a new updated status of clean, something I can again see by going into my audit report that I did before, in which I'll see that my latest entry, right here at the bottom, is now a clean status with our audit trail. As I mentioned earlier in the demo, the logbooks function can also be executed as a standalone transaction, independent of any order, using process manufacturing cockpit functionality in SAP. Finally, an important point here, because the plant maintenance equipment master is used, is to recognize the method by which it is linked to the order. Each equipment master in SAP has a standard linkage to a production work center, which is done on the location tab. And it's the linkage of this work center or resource to the phase within a PI sheet that drives the linkage to the equipment masters. The equipment could also be manually assigned if it did not have such a linkage, but there was a need to actually assign it to an individual order. In addition, the sort field is used to assign the current status as a means to use standard plant maintenance transactions to understand the current state of the equipment. Again, this is something that can be tweaked if necessary, if for instance the sort field is being used for another purpose, but it's a logical place because it's used in many places in plant maintenance as a means to sort equipment. So to summarize, the plant maintenance equipment masters are used as a means to integrate to SiMPL in order to update logbooks. Using the functionality of cockpits, I can actually drive information from my PI sheet, both displaying logbooks, showing the display logbook, as well as updating logbooks on the right. Each of the phases can have individual equipment qualification assignments and deassignments as needed, depending on their resource linkage to the equipment, although via configuration, a plus sign button can be placed here to manually assign and deassign equipment as necessary. And finally, the actual equipment statuses themselves are configurable depending on the nature of your logbook's design, including which statuses make the equipment available to be assigned to the next order. Thank you for watching the SiMPL Logbooks demo. For other SiMPL demos, please access the website.